It's exactly 9 o'clock. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good morning from Luxembourg. My name is Volker Täube. I'm from the EFTA Statistical Office. A warm welcome to the conference on data stewardship on chances and challenges that we've organized to mark the 30th anniversary of ESO, as we call the EFTA Statistical Office shortly. Well, as you all know, this conference was originally planned to take place in a hybrid mode, but thanks to the spread of Delta and Omicron, the resulting health concerns, we had to convert it completely into an online event. However, I think we have an exclusive list of speakers to whom I would also like to express here my gratitude for their flexibility for giving their presentations also in an online mode today. And first of all, I would like now to introduce to you Mr. Ólafur Hjálmarsson, who's the head of the EFTA Secretariat's communication unit. And Ólafur will moderate the conference and introduce the speakers. So with this, I give over to Ólafur, and once more, welcome everybody.
Thank you, Volker. Good morning to you all, and I concur what Volker said. Nice to have you on board in these circumstances. I think we will be broadcasting actually from over 10 locations today. I'm in the so-called EFTA house in Brussels. We will have colleagues pretty much spread out over Europe today. So we are looking forward to this extensive program that we have ahead of us. But you have the program already, so I don't need to go into detail right now on that. But I would first like to remind you that you can ask questions in the chat. So please do so all along the conference. But the first speaker today is our Secretary General, and he is based in Geneva. And that's Mr. Henri. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ólafur, and also from my side, welcome to all participants to this event of today. We're very glad to host it despite the circumstances. Now, data is the 21st century's oil, an immensely untapped, valuable asset. Like oil, for those who see data as fundamental value and learn how to extract and use it, there will be huge rewards. Data is essential for the smooth functioning of the digital economy, but it's also an asset for government and political decision makers, as it is for society in general. The increased amount of data collected through public bodies, but also private enterprises, opens up for possibilities of using such data for purpose of official statistics and ultimately for better policies. Data need to be accessible, comparable, standardized. Like oil, it is about accessibility of data. Once accessible, data's potential for statistical production seems obvious. The reduction of the response burden for enterprises and households, the reduction of costs usually linked to the collection of data for statistics, or the increase of quality and timeliness in statistics. These are but a few promises in this regard. For potential gains to be realized, several questions need to be addressed. How can national statistical institutions, as producers of official statistics, coordinate data producers and owners and other producers of official statistics in a new data ecosystem, including other national administrations? What are concrete experience countries have made so far with developing a data stewardship role for their national statistics institutions, including access to privately owned data for official statistics? And what can we learn from these endeavors? Which legal provisions are needed for accessing and using data for statistical purposes throughout the European statistics systems, including in the EEA, the European Economic Area, and the bilateral Swiss-EU agreement? And further to that, what would be the legal provisions required for our national statistics institution to take on a broader role as data stewards? Part of the answer to the first question probably lies with the appropriate definition of what a data stewardship role actually is, what it entails, what it does not entail. We will hear some answers to this during the conference today. As regards concrete experience so far, recently organized events organized by the German and Portuguese presidency, together with Eurostat, as well as a recently held World Data Forum in Bern, Switzerland, allowed for useful experience sharing. We will hear more about this later today. Legal provisions on statistics provide somewhat the basis for the national statistical institutions to operate effectively as data stewards. In this regard, the forthcoming European Data Act, which will also be addressed during the conference today, will provide the legal basis at European level for such data collection, including in the EEA. These are a series of exciting topics, and I'm looking forward to further discuss today these topics with a number of outstanding speakers. Thank you to the speakers to make yourself available throughout Europe, as we hear, and contribute to an exciting conference today. Today's event is held at the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the EFTA Statistics Office. We're proud at EFTA to contribute to the journey of official statistics, especially in today's exciting time, as the world of data is undergoing a profound transformation, a revolution, I should say. As governmental institutions, we are dedicated to providing sound policies and solid statistical basis as the precondition for such policies. I hope today's conference will usefully contribute to this objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Henri, from Geneva. We have a few minutes maybe to take a look at the program if you don't have it. We will, in this section here until 10:45, have a couple of introductory presentations. First from Mr. Ólafur Hjálmarsson, Director General of Statistics Iceland. Then Hege Hoff, who is the Deputy Secretary General here in EFTA in Brussels. Then we have up at 10 o'clock Mr. Tomaž Smrekar, Director General of the Statistical Office of Slovenia, which is of course the current presidency of the Council of the European Union. And then Volker Täube, who opened the seminar, will have his remarks at 10:30. He's the director of the EFTA Statistical Office in Luxembourg. Later on, we will go deeper into systems with presentations from member states and from Eurostat, and then later on also more topical questions on stewardship and etc. I'm not going to bother you with too many details on the program right now because you already have it, but let's see if Mr. Ólafur Hjálmarsson is ready. He's the Director General of Statistics Iceland, Hagstofa, as we call it. He's the current chair of the heads of EFTA NSIs group. And his presentation is about what do we mean by data stewardship and what should be the role of NSIs. So, Mr. Ólafur Hjálmarsson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Volker. Mr. Secretary, dear guests. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting and welcome you all to this event. It is quite appropriate to discuss data stewardship on the occasion of celebrating the 30th anniversary of the EFTA Statistical Office. As in this period, there have been vast changes in all aspects of society, and not least in the use and availability of data. I have been Director General of Statistics Iceland for nearly half this period, or 14 years. And during this time, there have also been substantial changes in statistics and the demands from users. These changes have both been gradual and in two big steps. One was the financial crash in 2008, and the other, the COVID-19 pandemic we are still fighting. One could also mention climate change, which is both gradual and comes in shocks when we go over certain thresholds. The external shocks have both resulted in more demands for more and new products and requests for more timely or faster response by our side. This applies equally to national statistical systems and international statistical organizations. When we are under pressure, we have demonstrated that we can adapt and change relatively fast. The gradual or underlying development in our environment does not seem as drastic as the shocks, but is nevertheless more profound and will have a more long-lasting effect. This development is shaped by the communication revolution, new technology, a vast and exponentially increasing magnitude of data, and last but not least, international firms that base their business model on big market share, and information on their customers. The so-called data revolution is a driver of the market and decides who are winners and losers. Maybe governments have been too slow to react and regulate. Few and big firms already rule certain markets.
Excuse me, Ólafur. I was just wondering about the slides. Are you're still with the first slide? Is that correct?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Maybe governments have been too slow to react and regulate. Few and big firms already rule certain markets, firms that did not even exist 30 years ago. Small and medium-sized firms struggle on certain markets, but in other sectors, big platforms have been enablers for small businesses, but at a high premium. You are either in or you are out. Data is bought and sold, used to promote the right products to the right customers. Markets are more uniform, and most of all transactions are recorded and stored. The Internet of Things and connectivity of household appliances, even vacuum cleaners, use of industrial robots, self-driving cars, smart meters, etc., pile up real-time data every second. Even though I describe this trend as gradual, it is bigger and has more lasting effects than the shocks, and seems only to continue. The data revolution even decides which countries are able to prospect and which not. The winner takes it all. There is a wealth of data out there, but only few big companies seem to rule the game. Smaller entities do not have the knowledge or number of data to take part in the game. The transaction costs of pooling data are also too high for small entities. There is an opportunity to reap more benefits for society by facilitating better access to data, for better public policies, and more innovation in the business sector, increasing the welfare of all. The European Union seems in the forefront of tackling this by regulation and new policy. The information, the forthcoming Data Act, the Data Governance Act, and the European data space are part of a broader policy initiatives, and we are here today to discuss the possible effects of these policies and the data economy on statistical systems. In the European Strategy for Data, the vision is to create a single market for data. Where data flows between EU countries and sectors such as from business to government and vice versa. The aim is to increase fairness in the data economy by addressing the difficulties of accessing data in order to enable public and private actors to benefit from data-driven innovation. This sounds like music in our ears. As statistical producers, we would be happy to get access to more business data and platforms. We already have free flow of official data collected for statistical purposes within the common market, where Eurostat and the EFTA Statistical Office play a vital role. Now the aim seems to be to broaden and open up the flow of data from business to business, from business to government, and from government to business within the European Economic Area. Needless to say, the data must comply with other EU regulations, such as on personal protection, trade secrets, and of course, as concerns us, Regulation 223/2009 on European statistics. But what has this to do with data stewardship? To facilitate the access to data and data sharing, there is a need for data intermediaries or brokers. The EU regulation on European data governance is set to increase trust in data intermediaries and strengthen data sharing across the EU. It is to combat fragmentation if each country legislates data-related issues in an uncoordinated way, which would intensify fragmentation in the internal market. Although data stewardship is not directly mentioned in the regulation, data intermediaries seem to have similar or the same functions. But it seems not always clear what we mean by data stewardship in this context. In a report prepared by a high-level expert group on business to government data sharing, data stewardship is one of the key functions. The group proposes data stewards functions both in the public and private sector, and that network of such data stewards should be encouraged by the Commission. In the report, it is proposed that data steward should have the required expertise and authority to look for opportunities for productive collaborations or to respond to external requests for data. The primary role of data steward is to systemize the process of partnering and help scale efforts where suitable. They should ensure that the right processes are in place in their organizations and that those processes are ethically sound. Data stewardship is also defined in an annex to a concept paper presented by Eurostat in March this year for the high-level workshop on data stewardship. It says, usually what we mean by data steward is a specialist within an organization that supervises the use of data within the organization, that is, inward-looking. This role is extended to supervise the use of data across different organizations within the government as a whole, business sector, or joint use of data by business and government, that is, outward-looking. As we are speaking about the ESS, we can extend this and add between countries and within the EU and EFTA. I will refer to this extended role, that is data stewardship beyond statistical system and borders within the European internal market. It is important to stress that data stewardship is not only about administering access to data we already hold or we are responsible for. In Article 11 of the Data Governance Act, one of the conditions for providing data services is the provider may not use the data for its provide services for other purposes than to put them at the disposal of data users, and data sharing services shall be placed in a separate legal entity. This does not apply to statistical institutions and non-profit entities, but demonstrates, in my view, the purpose and the thought behind the act. It is my understanding that data stewardship is in general to enable access to and the reuse of data on a transparent, open, and equal basis within the internal market in accordance with regulations such as GDPR and Regulation 223/2009 on European statistics. The data steward does not necessarily have to be the owner of the data or user, but offers services to data holders or owners and the users of data. I'll take a small sidestep by the question, what do we mean by the word data? The European Data Governance Act defines data as any digital representation of acts, facts, or information, and any compilation of such acts, facts, or information, including in the form of sound, visual, or audiovisual recording. This is a much broader definition than we usually use when discussing data for statistical use. This does not come as a surprise, as the Act covers all digital content to encompass social media, video streaming platforms, and search engines. Usually, we use the term data for a kind of a raw material to use to produce information or knowledge, or in other words, statistics. Data from different systems or sources are often unstructured and need to be validated and structured to be fit to produce meaningful knowledge. It can be aggregated and non-aggregated microdata, identifiable data, and data that has been made untraceable to individuals or firms. 30 years ago, we would hardly have considered digital image as data. As discussed at the last teachings meeting in Poland, Earth observation from satellites is already used for the production of statistics. We should be open to the possibilities of using different digital content for statistical use and the potential it gives. Well, let's go back to the main issue. The European strategy for data and accompanying regulations is to ensure trust in data intermediaries and to secure that the use of data is in accordance with EU law. In the European statistical system, these issues are very well known and are part of our core business. There is a free flow of data within the European statistical system, and we are used to work with sensitive personal and business data within and across borders. In fact, we are here today celebrating 30 years of free flow of statistical data and statistics within the single market. As national statistical offices and European statistical system, we have to react to the changing environment and the demands for open and accessible data. We need to stay relevant in the European data space and promote the use of statistical data and statistics. The question is, to what extent we should open up our data for reuse and what effect it has on our image and brand. We also have to ask to what extent we should engage in data stewardship for data owned by others, that is, other government institutions or private firms, data which is not used for official statistical purposes. For national statistical offices, Eurostat and the European statistical system, trust is one of the key assets. The European data strategy, with a single market for data and access to privately held business data, provides both opportunities and challenges. The opportunities seem obvious. Better access to privately held data, facilitated access to data across borders, and a common EU regulation instead of fragmentation, to name a few. But there are also several challenges, such as data for commercial use that is sold on the market, data used by public authorities for surveillance, and the possible effects on trust of opening up access to data collected for statistical purposes. In some cases, we are already data stewards or parts of the statistical system or the government. But should we open up and administer data for public and private agents who own the data, sell it, or use it for marketing, or use it for public administration or supervision? This could all be legitimate use of data, but would clearly not apply to data collected for statistical purposes. One of the hallmarks of public statistics is the guarantee to responders or providers of access to data that the data will only be used for statistical purposes and research. Can we differentiate clearly between the two roles of collecting data for statistical purposes and the role of data steward for other means? Is there a clear line between the two roles? Are we prepared to pay for access to privately held data and act as intermediaries by selling access to data? I think we should be very careful, as a trust in official statistics and data handling is our most valuable asset. The conditions for reuse must be clear, with defined disclosure controls and secure infrastructure. We should concentrate on our core business and free flow of data within the European statistical system. But we can open more up to well-defined uses of data and act as data stewards for specified uses, for example, by other public institutions and the research community. While we should be careful when dealing with commercial use of data and maybe leave it to private entities. We could also support other public bodies by granting secure access to their data. We already have the knowledge and infrastructure they lack, and thus bring down transaction costs. I think it's vital for us to seize the opportunity of the European data space by securing access to privately held data and data intermediaries for statistical purposes. There are two factors that drive this need. One is the diminishing willingness of people to answer traditional surveys, and the other is the demand for real-time information and indicators. New technology and rapidly increasing magnitude of data from the Internet of Things, automation, digital communication, etc. enables us to better meet the demands and increase efficiency. To facilitate this, we need a better legal basis for accessing privately held data for statistical purposes. The benefits for society will be less response burdens by individuals and firms, and more timely information of higher quality for governments, businesses, researchers, and the public as a whole. This is exactly what the European data strategy and the accompanying regulations are about, to materialize in a more data-driven services and products, increase efficiency, and improve public policy implementation and services. When it comes to our strengths in the data economy, one can name trust, knowledge, long experience of handling sensitive data, security, quality, structures and standards, and data sharing within the internal market. These are all valuable properties. But what the business world also needs and values even more is speed, access to big quantities of data, and most importantly, to be able to link the data with their customers or potential customers and products. We can meet some of these requirements for the business sector and most of them for the government sector. Here, we must take into account our role as a statistical system, legal aspects and ethics for using data and the balance of privacy protection and accessibility. I will not go further into the discussion of ethics, but it's clearly one of the issues we have to address. And we have the European Statistical Code of Practice to follow in this regard. The European Data Governance Act and the European strategy is to strengthen the internal market for data. As I mentioned before, we already have free flow of statistical data, and we can use that advantage to act as data stewards for the whole internal market, instead of parts of it, offering better coverage and bigger datasets rather than a more fragmented system. While Google almost covers the world, the European statistical system covers the whole internal market. A prime example of this is, in my view, the population and housing hub. When national statistical institutions connect to one big hub in Eurostat, where users can extract data for the whole internal market down to smaller areas within each country. The question is, if we could use this as a model for data sharing across and based on the same principles as apply in the statistical system. Dear guests, we must act to stay relevant in the data economy and rethink our role. There are ample opportunities for the statistical system to benefit from and to contribute to the European data space. The data revolution will only continue, and the magnitude of data will increase exponentially for the future. New technology, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, opens up new territories and speeds up the production of statistics. To take on a bigger role as data stewards, we must be proactive and stay at the forefront by building on our strengths we already have as a statistical system. Promote these strengths and be ready for change. To make that change happen, we must adapt the regulation on European statistics. I see in the discussion paper presented for the partnership group meeting last week, titled Making the European Statistical System Fit for the Future, that this is exactly where we seem to be heading. With these plans, we and our customers can be optimistic for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ólafur. If you could stick around for a couple of minutes, because we have a question for you in the chat. So thanks to the one who asked a question. It's actually anonymous. You can ask questions anonymously or by name. It's up to you. So what's your view about the legal basis for stewardship of data as an NSI? Does existing legislation fully cover public and commercial data use by NSIs?
In my view, it does not fully encompass the need for better access to privately held data. And the main problem that we have faced here in Iceland when collecting data from private firms is that they have had big reservations on us asking for data on their customers, on the third party. So it has to be very clear that we have access to privately held data and on their customers. And we should have that in mind when considering changes in the European statistical law. I think this is the main issue. And then it is if we would have more allowances to use as data, to work as data stewards for other means than to produce statistics.
Exactly. You mentioned the European law, and actually there was also a follow-up question to this question. What does the legal basis look like?
Well, today or
yes, I mean, I understand the question as it is. If you could describe the legal basis today, yes, it's my understanding.
The legal basis today is that in general that the firms are obliged to give Statistics Iceland or in the statistical system access and answer requests for data. It's clear that they have to supply us with data on their own business and their let's say finances and workforce and so on. But the questions arise when we ask about, for example, in Iceland when we were working on a big after the crash of the banks, big project by looking at the debt situation of persons of households. So we had to collect information from all the financial institutions in Iceland on the debt of each family and each individual. And this required a special temporary allowance or in the law on Statistics Iceland while we were conducting this research. Of course, with the new personal protection regulation, firms are much more aware of their responsibilities, and the personal protection authorities have always granted us allowance to access these data as it's based on legitimate and legal permissions.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we have a couple of minutes left. Maybe just a question from myself. You come from a relatively small country, yes. And you've been in this business for a long time, and so I wonder if you could describe the importance of this statistical cooperation for your country. Yeah, both the cooperation with the EFTA countries, but also, of course, with Europe and Eurostat.
Yes, it's very, very important in both a pool of expertise that we have access to. All these, of course, Iceland is a very small country in this cooperation, and the number of employees at Statistics Iceland are only 125. And all the regulation standards and support we get from both Eurostat and the EFTA Statistical Office is invaluable for us. And it's very difficult for us as a small institution to comply with all these requirements. But these requirements ensure that both the Icelandic government and Icelandic public, they get quality information that is standardized for the whole market, and they can they can compare Iceland with other nations, and that's a most valuable factor. And we have this very good cooperation with both Eurostat and the EFTA Statistical Office, and we often bring up problems we have in implementation or when we are dealing with standards or quality matters, and we always get very good support from these institutions. So it's vital. It's very important. It has totally changed all our production and how we work.
Thank you, Ólafur Hjálmarsson, Director General of Statistics Iceland, Hagstofa.
Thank you.
He's the acting chair of the heads of EFTA NSIs group. So let's continue with our program. And next up is Hege Hoff. She's the Deputy Secretary General of EFTA, and in fact the head of the EFTA Brussels duty station, and dealing with the EEA agreement, which we can say that is one of the cornerstones of the existence of our statistical office. So Hege Hoff, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Torfinnur, and good morning, dear colleagues, dear participants. Let me also wish you a very warm welcome to this conference, and thank you so much for your participation. Today's topic is of high strategic importance for the partners in the European statistical system, that is the National Statistical Institutes of the EU and the EFTA member states. Before addressing data stewardship, a topic that relates to the future roles of national statistical offices and statistics, I would like to highlight that this conference is also organized to mark the 30 years anniversary of the EFTA Statistical Office. So congratulations to all my dear ESO colleagues. At the same time, it is also an excellent occasion to remind ourselves about the successful statistical cooperation between the EU and the EFTA member states during this period, for in fact 27 years. The EEA agreement enables a statistical cooperation between the 3 EEA EFTA states and the EU, where statistics is one of the horizontal and flanking policy areas covered by the agreement. I think it's fair to say that the EEA agreement has had a huge impact on official statistics produced in the European Economic Area. Looking ahead, we are now approximating a new data system in Europe and in the EEA through a set of new initiatives under the European Strategy for Data. This defines how Europe will work with and use data in the future. These legal initiatives are, of course, also important for the future development of the EEA agreement and to ensure safe and thriving data economy in the EEA. Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, the 3 EEA EFTA states, submitted an EEA EFTA comment on the European data strategy in June last year. In their common position, they emphasize their commitment to cooperate closely with the EU to realize a single market for data in the EEA. They support the vision that Europe should become a leading role model for a society empowered by data. In parallel, discussions on data stewardship have already been ongoing for some years in the global statistical community. Clearly, this discussion together with the initiatives concerning European data, raises a series of opportunities and challenges for the statistical institutes and partners in the European statistical system. The national statistical institutes will have to look into and reflect upon their role in this new data system. Moreover, there are important discussions ahead of us on the role of the producers of the statistics and on coordination of statistical production in this new data system, including coordination on national and European level, coordination between national statistical institutes and other producers of official statistics. And also, to what degree should the NSIs coordinate data in the public sector? And perhaps linked to this, to what degree should the NSIs take on functions of a data stewardship? To the extent the NSIs should take on broader functions, this would probably also need to be addressed in new legislation. Well, this was a little look into the near future, and we will see examples and discussed experiences with the data stewardship role and coordination today. I very much look forward to hearing the perspectives of the national statistical institutes as well as the central banks. I also look forward to learning more about the legislative initiatives concerning data, such as the European Data Act and their implication for the EEA agreement and statistical production. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Hege. Well, there is a question, but I'm not sure if it's probably to you. About statistical organizations often share data, or Volker, you might also be there to reply. There's a question from the chat. Statistical organizations often share data internationally. How would stewardship work in the scenario legally if law is framed in an EU context?
Yeah, if you want, Hege, I can try to say a few words about that. But well, I mean, the reason for this conference is that we are just currently discussing, what we need to set up. So, I mean, if we would have the solutions already, we would probably not need the conference. But I mean, this is, of course, ongoing. As I see it, and I will also shortly make the point in the presentation, in the very short presentation that I will do later on. I think that this data stewardship role is, of course, let's say, focusing on the situation within national boundaries, for national statistical institutes. Of course, I mean, the national states, they are organized in international systems like the ESS, the European Statistical System. And there we are, of course, also discussing, what has to be set up internationally. But when we talk about the data stewardship roles, I think I understand it like that we are first talking about the roles that national statistical institutes play in a national context. So then this is, of course, national legislation. And there, I think, well, of course, you have different settings in the countries, and that might also be reflected later on in probably the legislation that we will see. But of course, concretely, for the time being, I can't say. I wonder if anybody else could say something about how the legislation would look like. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Volker. I don't know if Hege has anything to add to this, or?
No, thank you. I think Volker said what is to say at this point. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Hege. In EFTA House, like myself. So we are from many different corners in Europe today. And then next up, I hope the next presenter is ready. It's Mr. Tomaž Smrekar. He's the Director General of the Statistical Office of Slovenia, and as you know, is the current presidency of the Council of the European Union. And his presentation is about designing data governance that preserves core values of official statistics in the forthcoming era. So yeah, here we are looking forward. So Tomaž, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, dear colleagues. And dear EFTA Statistical Office, as the Chair of the Council Working Party on Statistics and Director General of the Statistical Office of the Republic of Slovenia, let me first congratulate on your 30th anniversary. On this special occasion, I would like also to thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss the importance of the data stewardship for our statistical community. Data stewardship is nowadays a very popular term discussed in many international fora, also outside official statistics. However, the important question for us official statisticians is if this is for us something new or something we are to some extent being doing for a long time. The topic of data stewardship is proving to be a very actual and relevant both during the Slovenian presidency and during the trio presidency of Germany, Portugal, and Slovenia. We addressed this topic on various occasions, directly or indirectly. However, the term is sometimes understood differently, and the need to come up with a common understanding was also frequently expressed in our debates. Next slide, please. The outline of my presentation is some background, goals, opportunities and challenges and conclusions. Next, please. The response to COVID pandemic has in many cases increased the need for better data governance. Many statistical offices found an urgent need to expand their mandate if they wanted to respond fast to user needs. With the COVID crisis, we found ourselves in a situation when users demanded new statistics and we began to face the need to play a new role in the data ecosystem, not only as data providers, but also as service providers. With all this, we began to wonder what are our tasks, what the users expect from us, how is this consistent with the mandate given to us? And last but not least, very important, we began to wonder about the consistency of what we are doing and what users expect from us in relation to our core values. Next, please. What is the relation between data governance and data stewardship? Data governance is about policies, procedures, and rules that govern our data. It is about the framework. So data governance is a data management concept concerning the capability and disease through the whole life cycle of data. Data governance is about data ownership, data accessibility, data security, data quality, and knowledge. All these different elements are connected together through the people involved, with the technologies used, and the processes that take place. So all these elements should work together and they need to be understood, connected, and synchronized. These are concepts and rules that are operationalized through the data stewardship. Next, please. The data stewardship is about making the data governance policies and principles are actually followed by overseeing every aspect of the data lifecycle: collecting, processing, sharing, storing, archiving, and deleting data in accordance with an organization's established data governance principles. As data are dispersed and generated by different stakeholders, it is essential that everyone in the process, from data generation, data usage, and data publication, collaborates smoothly and establishes a well-defined, sustainable, and solid partnership, and the data stewards were identified to be indispensable in such a regard. Next, please. As statistical offices, we have data governance and data stewardship already integrated in our generic models. The generic activity model for statistical organizations describes and well defines the activities that take place within our organizations. It extends and complements the genetic statistical business process model by adding additional activities needed to support statistical production. For example, corporate support is about governance, while a specific process is defined in the general statistical business process model. The framework that we have with two models already fits well into the discussion of data governance and data stewardship. Next, please. Data lifecycle identifies the stages through which data pass in order to be managed well and to maximize its value. The cycle helps track the journey from handling data to identifying and understanding the relationships between those data, resulting in information and knowledge. The result of such knowledge is the basis for governments to take action and decisions, whether strategic, tactical, or operational. Government data value lifecycle is about navigating and maximizing the value of data that are already held within government. However, we are increasingly aware that in addition to the public sector data, private companies, business community, and civil society are also generating data that would be very useful to integrate with the data we have to meet our users' needs. As these data are often high in volume, veracity, velocity, and come from very diverse sources, managing lifecycle becomes a challenging task despite our great interest. Not to be overlooked that at the same time we are facing big challenges in access to this data, as well as the lack of knowledge to analyze and deal with this new kind of data. Next, please. The need for data access has become increasingly highlighted, and we have begun to discuss how should we work in these changed circumstances to remain relevant. We have become aware that if we want to continue to evidence-based decision-making, we have to move from so-called second wave of open data, and this is very important. This second wave is driven by the push focus, open by default and open government data, to the third wave that operates on the reuse on public and private data, creation of partnerships and on publishing with purpose. We realize that our high-value datasets cannot always respond to the high-value questions that users address to us. Users have already addressed such questions that we could not answer, such as, for example, to respond to the needs of sustainable development goals. So, we are already well aware of the user's needs or the questions they want us to answer. But finding a way to answer them is still quite challenging. Therefore, we have to start to focus more on publishing our data with the purpose to respond to these questions and needs. Next, please. The need for more efficient data management, the need to address challenges of processing huge amounts of data, the provision of digital service to the entire public sector, including statistical offices, has started several initiatives also at the European Commission, the UN, and OECD in recent years. While the OECD, besides data stewardship and data government, focuses on digitalization, the UN and EU pays close attention also to the role of NSIs in the new data ecosystem and to the core values of official statistics. Next, please. The OECD work has focused on the recommendation on digital government strategy as a framework for reference. Today's technology is not only a strategic driver for improving public sector efficiency, but also support effectiveness of policies and create more open, transparent, innovative, participatory and trustful governments. This is the base to support the development and implementation of digital government strategies reviews in the countries that have recognized the benefit of concluding such a review and strive to become a state-of-the-art digital public sector. With the aim to support governments in using data to transform the public sector and address issues of public governance, the OECD published also some other documents that are very, very relevant also for us at NSIs, such as the report, The Path to Become a Data-Driven Public Sector, and OECD recommendation on enhancing access to and sharing of data, a set of principles and policy guidelines on how governments can maximize the cross-sectoral benefits of all types of data while protecting the rights of individuals and organizations. Next, please. UN. CES and its bureau have discussed these topics on several occasions. According to the Task Force Working Plan in June 2023, the final report on data governance of core responsibilities for data stewardship and practical tools will be endorsed. Important debate for NSIs was the June's meeting relating to the discussion on the core values, titled How National Statistical Systems Adhere to the Core Values of Official Statistics. This meeting raised several important and relevant points and recognized the need to initiate a conversation between the official statistics community and also to map core values to the fundamental principles of official statistics, to define behaviors that support the core values and implementation of fundamental principles. Next, please. The important base for our future work at EU level were the report towards a European strategy on business-to-government data sharing for the public interest, made by high-level expert work on business-to-government data sharing, and the European data strategy. Both were published in February last year. Under the EU data strategy, 3 legislative acts are foreseen: the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, the Act on High-Value Data Sets. The Data Governance Act will set up robust mechanisms to facilitate the reuse of certain categories of protected public sector data, increase trust in data intermediation services, and foster data altruism across the EU. The Data Act will aim to create a framework which will encourage business to government and support business to business data sharing. Next, please. The ESS is also addressing actively the challenges with the changes in the data environment. New legislative acts, the digitalization, and the evolving data ecosystem encourages NSIs to develop, experiment, and innovate, while trying to stay relevant to the users and having in mind our advantages that should be preserved, such as to act transparently to maintain the trust and reputation we have built so far. Next, please. I will now show you the 3 presidencies' activities in this field during the last 18 months. First, Germany. It was a high-level meeting on ESS communication and cooperation in times of crisis. The results were Wiesbaden Memorandum on ESS coordinated response to future crises and the European Statistical Recovery Dashboard. Next, please. Under the Portuguese presidency, the high-level meeting Data Stewardship Experience within the ESS was organized. Keywords discussed there were importance of data stewardship, experience on national approaches, and future role of the ESS. High-level seminar on data from and for society. Keywords there were relevance, contribution to society, value of statistics as public good. Next, please. There was a high-level meeting under the Slovenian presidency titled Timeliness Matters, Ways to Stay Ahead. It was about timeliness, one of the crucial issues in the times of Corona crisis. Key words were transparent communication, partnerships, digitalization, reputation of the statistical system. Next, please. There was also a consultation on data stewardship among NSIs chaired by Eurostat. Next, please. There were steps set for the way forward. The keywords are: we are heterogeneous. Data stewards need to further elaborate and be promoted. Data stewardship role of the NSIs is not data access by the NSIs to privately held data. So it's much broader than this. Next, please. Goals were set, and these goals can be summed up as following. We have to strive to find the appropriate balance between a better use of data and the preservance of confidentiality. In all the further activities that will be carried out, we must keep in mind that we will continue to ensure trust in official statistics. We want to contribute to the policy objective, better use of data for society, the economy, and the environment to make better data-based decisions. Next, please. At the NSI level, the challenges and opportunities are mainly related to the improvement of the efficiency of the statistical production. We as NSIs are not equally developed in statistical production. Some of us have more challenges on the input side, some on the output or throughput side. Next, please. Unlike Slovenia, which has a strong registry development in the statistical office, uses extensively the administrative data in the statistical production, some NSIs still face many challenges in obtaining administrative data in their countries, so not only privately held data. Next, please. Here is the practical example of Slovenia about new data sources and how they are used in different maturity levels of dissemination. I will not go into details, but we can see that some of these data sources, like scanner data from retailers, are already in a regular production or regular dissemination. There are some that are in experimental dissemination, and there are some data sources that are in development phase at the moment, not published yet. Next, please. The data processing phase is subject to continuous improvements. The key to successful data integration is the use of unique identifiers, data that are well metadata supported, standard definitions, concepts, code lists, interoperability, and use of standardized IT solutions. Next, please. As I have mentioned before, we will maintain the trust of our users if we will give them relevant data. However, our product must be as open to them as possible. We know that different degrees of openness exist. The publication of our aggregate data on our websites must be machine readable. They must be adequately metadata supported. Posts must be transparent and understandable to the users. We have to follow our statistical principles while publishing our results, including the principle of statistical confidentiality. Our data must be acceptable to users in places so they can find them as quickly and easy as possible. Next, please. The general openness of an open government data portal are assessed and evaluated with different open data indices, as for example, the Global Open Data Index and the Open Data Barometer. The European Commission performs a landscaping exercise called the Open Data Maturity, and just last week they published the Open Data Maturity Report 2021 with the insights on the development achieved in the field of open data in Europe in 2021. On the slide you are facing, there are the results of the open data inventory from the Open Data Watch, so an organization closely connected to UN. As we can see in the chart with the overall assessment, the distribution is uneven. Some NSIs between the ESS and EFTA countries are in overall more open in comparison to others. Next, please. Again, example of Slovenia. The keyword here are researchers and access to microdata for research purposes. This is also about data stewardship. We have been developing this since 2005, and the process is still going on, and there is a lot of value added from this exercise. Next, please. Due to time constraints, I will skip this. It's less important. Here, this slide, the key question would be how we can make ESS fit for the future. Next, please. The high-level event planned with the French presidency to the Council of EU in Lyon will provide an opportunity to discuss key issues that might address a potential revision of the Regulation 223 on European statistics. The discussion will probably tackle two issues: how to solve the problem of access to new data sources like privately held data, and the role of NSIs as data stewards. The same two issues will also be exposed in the further improvements of the code of practice and these relations. Next, please. An additional significant challenge in the ESS among the member states will be the implementation of the Data Governance Act and Data Act. To some extent, both these two acts will have an impact on NSIs. Regardless of the diversity between NSIs, I believe that in the future we will share our expertise and learn from each other. We are already looking forward to further discussions between UNEC, on the data stewardship and the core values, as well as the task force results. The outcome will certainly have a significant impact on our future work in the ESS and at the national level. Next, please. Allow me to conclude. If we are asking ourselves how to design data governance that preserves core values of official statistics in the forthcoming area, our future is challenging. For sure, we need to keep the data access at least at the same level. However, we must constantly strive to assess new data sources as well as improve the ones that we are already using. To fulfill the user's expectations, we need to stay relevant. Transparent and open communications with different stakeholders is of crucial importance. Nevertheless, it is important that the core value of official statistics are not compromised and that we preserve our independence that complies with the fundamental principles of official statistics as well as with the European Statistical Code of Practice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tomaž Smrekar. I know that you have other applications very quickly, but if you have a couple of minutes, I believe my colleague Volker Täube in our statistical office has a couple of questions for you. If you have just a few minutes, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Volker. Thank you. I'm very sorry that I will have to leave this interesting conference, but yes, I have some, let's say, spare more minutes and I'm very eager to answer your questions.
Okay, go ahead, Volker. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, thanks a lot to Tomaž for the interesting presentation. My first question was on the graphic that you showed with the government data value cycle. So, of course, I understood that this is public sector data. That was slide number 7, I think, that you showed.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if that would be, let's say, privately held data, in order, to have a look at that. First of all, probably is the data value cycle, would it be similar to if it would be private data? And then secondly, where would then data stewardship come in, actually? Would it cover all the stages, or would it mainly be on the collecting and generating, where, services would be that statistical offices say, well, it should be this nomenclature, it should be this number of entities or something like this, or how do you see that?
Yeah, it's an excellent question and obviously a very difficult one. I think we have to differentiate when we talk about privately held data, because the players in this field are very, very different. And some of the players, as these platforms, they are actually mature, at least as we national statistical institutes are, and they are providing already a lot of value added. So here I think is a question that we should have them on board, build partnerships with them, because the potential in some fields is very close to our potential. But of course, in some other cases, that will be more only about the provision of the data the metadata compared things like this, and that other actors in this environment will have to play a different role. So I think the key issue are partnerships and collaboration, cooperation between very different players that can definitely contribute on different levels. We are not all at the same level, and NSIs are here very, very advanced in comparison with majority of other players.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tomaž. And then, if I may just have a second question that was in slide 22. You mentioned that you have mobile network operator data in the domain of tourism, and that you're currently disseminating it experimentally. I was just wondering how this looks like. What are you disseminating there, for example?
When we talk about this mobile network operator data, I would like to stress, let's say, two issues. One, which is not very promising, was that in the past we have better opportunities to use this data. So the flexibility of the data protection commissioner was more open. But then, and this was in the years, let's say 2017-16. Then there was more focus on digitalization, and definitely these doors have become closing, also in connection with protection of European data. So cooperation of these institutions at the level of EU. So at the moment we are not allowed to get microdata in this respect, but we were able to have them in the past. For tourism data, it's so that in cooperation with Bank of Slovenia, we are able to work with aggregates, and quite a number of servers have been replaced and will be replaced in future with this data. So I would also like to mention that during the pandemic times, there was in many countries of European countries, there's have been more eagerness to work with national statistical offices. This is one issue. Second issue is in connection with European central banks and also national banks. They have recognized the importance of such data at the moments when some regular operations cannot go on. But they insist that our knowledge, meaning NSI's knowledge, is so crucial for this data lifecycle handling that they would provide, they would be really interested and are pushing hard that we keep these operations also at the times where this COVID crisis will be past or in future. So I think this is a very important message, not only for us official statisticians, but also to legislations, to legislators, and actually to the whole society, because we have to decide, do we want information to further improve the quality of lives of European people, or there is a much more ponder or imbalance in data protection. So I am very sure we have to have this well balanced. If this will not be balanced, then future will not be bright. And I mean balanced on both sides, not only on one side, that we get everything and maybe confidentiality is not so crucial. But so this balance is important, and there are players that are not only official statisticians. And of course, we have to talk a lot about these issues.
Thanks a lot, Tomaž.
Yeah, thank you, Tomaž, for this comprehensive and deep presentation. So we are getting close to the end of the first part of the conference. We can call it the introductory part.
Sorry, no, if I interrupt, I just saw that there is another question that just came into the chat. Sorry for interrupting there, but I think that's also a very interesting question. Maybe if Tomaž can still take that. That's from our dear colleague Tobias Thomas from Austria. He just said, great presentation. How do you see the potential of NSIs as data stewards for the quality of statistics and data in an entire national data system?
Oh, it's an excellent question, and it's a very, very important one. So thank you for this question. It's very obvious. In the vast majority of member states, or in every single member state, we are #1 experts in this field. It is very obvious. We are handling with this issue, let's say in some cases, Tobias, in your office from 1850. So with all the experiences we have in national statistical offices, without our input at the national level, the speed of the process can't be equal in comparison if we jump in this train. This is one issue. Second issue is that there are different at national state there are different players. And there are different roles. So in some countries, the roles of NSIs in this exercise are by legal means more broader than in other states. But I think this preservation of our core values is crucial. So we have to continue working, we have to cooperate with other institutions, but we have to keep in mind that we are at the position we are today because people trust us, and that we have a very good record from the past. But definitely we have, yes, Tobias, we have to contribute, otherwise the speed of this train will not be an express train, and we need at the moment an express train because our societies simply needs us at this moment.
Thank you very much, Tomaž.
Yes, thank you, Tomaž. So, as I said, Volker Täube, you are up next to sort of conclude this introductory part, and then we are looking forward to future presentations today. But Volker.
Yeah, currently trying to get my slide on. Well, it says actually it shares already, but I can't see it. Take a look, Ryo, when I say sharing, and I say screen.
You could go there to the
to this one.
Yeah.
Here.
Share full screen. Yeah.
Does it come up? Ah, here we go. Yeah.
Okay, and then if you open up.
Yeah. Like that. Just don't see the rest of the stuff here. Okay, but anyway, let's go ahead. So
yeah, it's on, Volker. So
on.
go ahead. Thank you.
Got it, finally. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, once more welcome from my side. So I have the pleasure now to give you a quick overlook to our 30 years EFTA Statistical Office conference. And well, I would like to say in general terms right now, a few words about where we are coming from and where we might be going with official statistics and data stewardship. So this is more as a kind of, well, trying to mention the connecting points, you know, and try to trace it. It's not that much innovative when it comes to, well, presented contents. This is, of course, up to the presenters then later on. Well, I think that just like official statistics, the topic of data stewardship is fundamentally linked to ideas such as planning, harmonization, and comparing. So, yeah, here we go. The idea that society would benefit from planning was already formulated by the Greek philosopher Plato. Just to mention at one time somebody else than Einstein always, so we got Plato here. So Plato had depicted an ideal society in which planning was to be done by the greatest minds in the society. Well, I think this sounds like good company. And with the advent of official statistics in modern societies, the collection of data became increasingly important in order to generate statistical outputs that support planning processes, including, of course, political decision-making in these societies, while also delivering factual information, we should not forget that, for the societal discourses in general. I think that this development can be traced back in statistical descriptions first of regional phenomena. Well, think here, for example, of the Victorian area poverty maps of London in the 19th century, and national phenomena, like, for example, the first census in Switzerland, which was conducted in 1850 already. So as I mentioned right in the beginning in one of the comments that I made, I think that in the beginning as well, statistical production here was quite a, let's say, regional national affair. And then, of course, well, it spread out more and more because there was the need for comparison also on international levels. And the need, well, for the quality aspects in order to ensure reliability and comparability, especially also for international comparisons, was evident here. And it's, of course, still valid today, where official statistics is embedded in international statistical systems, such as the European statistical system. Well, with the digital age, the number of administrative and private data producers and owners, of course, increased considerably. striving for the efficiency gains while also increasing the relevance of official statistics in the use of data, national statistical institutes need to get access to new data sources while applying quality and harmonization standards. Hence, to a certain extent, the increasing need for international comparisons demands to shift the focus somewhat back to the organization of national data production, because data stewardship is then, of course, something that will be exercised by national statistical institutes on the national level again. Of course, while being coordinated, as I said already, with the international statistical systems they are part of. Well, the NSIs as coordinators of the national statistical systems have to take over an increasingly expanding role, including overall also provision of services to different data producers. And we heard already today a couple of times that well, probably we have to look for partnerships more and more. So we can't expect it all to be solved only by legislation. For example, when it comes to defining quality standards for data collection, this is why we are also talking today about data governance when we are addressing the topic of data stewardship. So with the conference, we have tried to sort the presentations that will follow after the coffee break that we will have in a few minutes into different topical blocks. Although, of course, they have naturally a large overlap, these topic blocks. But however, the idea was first, well, what are the questions that we need to address? This is, of course, not an exhaustive list, but we think that there are some interesting aspects we need to address. In the first block that we will have after the coffee break, we will hear also a little bit more about the legal provisions that we need for national statistical institutes as well as central banks, both being producers of official statistics, so as to act as data stewards. And well, the question here is also, well, how do they coordinate with each other? Then, well, a second point here that has already been shining through also in some of the presentations, how does the European statistical system adapt to data stewardship? And one other question in this first block that we have after the coffee break is how is data stewardship coordinated between different producers of official statistics? I mean, I mentioned that already in the first point. Is there, will it be jointly done? Is there more the idea to share, let's say, services, responsibilities for certain statistics? We know, of course, central banks are mainly responsible for balance of payments. So what are the roles here? So after that, after the lunch break, then we will have a second block, and there we will see presentations that mainly talk about the experiences made with the implementation of the data stewardship roles on a national level. So what are the good examples of the implementation, and what are the experiences for other international bodies? And there we will have also a short intervention from our colleagues from UNECE reporting back about their experiences and the stand of the discussions that they currently have on data stewardship. And then in the third and, so to say, the final block, where we will look overall on the legal aspects of the data stewardship role. Well, you all know also that the European Data Act is in preparation, quite advanced, I would say also. So, well, how does it actually relate to data stewardship? What does it make possible, and what are still open questions here? What do we still have to address? And of course, another question that is especially interesting for the EFTA countries is how does the European Data Act impact on the European Economic Area Agreement, the EEA agreement? So I think that with this, by and large, we have marked the the cornerstones, the topics that we will address in the different topic blocks where we will have presentations today still. And yeah, with this, I think I'm going to stop here, and we're going to break for having a coffee. And maybe I give back to Tofinor. You can tell us. I think it will be 11 that we have to be back, if I'm not totally wrong.
Yes, absolutely, Volker. So thank you for this good overview. We are actually on the minute, almost on time, so we are getting quite well ahead here. Yes, so you're right. We resume again at 11 sharp. So let's have a coffee break for some 15 minutes and see you back here at 11 o'clock.